House Bill 6 by Representative Muscarello to amend Title 15, execution of a death sentence, provides for methods of execution, confidentiality of records, information, criminal penalties for disclosure of records, civil cause of action, provides for an exception to public records.
Chairman Muscarello, on your bill. Do we have a couple of technical amendments? Madam Clerk, on the amendments.
First set of amendments offered by Representative Muscarello, one-page set number 109.
Rep. Muscarello, on your amendment.
These are just some technical amendments, and I'd ask that you adopt the technical amendments.
Any objections to the adoption of the amendment? Without objection.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, today I bring to you House Bill 6, and this bill does three things. It declares that any records or information pertaining to the purchase, providing, and manufacturing of drugs related to the death penalty shall be strictly confidential and not subject to public disclosure. Secondly, it would make disclosure by a person subject to felony offenses and or civil penalties if they are to expose the drug manufacturers, etc. Thirdly, the methods of execution shall be lethal injection, nitrogen hypoxia, and electrocution. Now, this bill will bring healthy debate, as it should. What is not debatable is that the death penalty is legal in Louisiana. What is not debatable is that 57 people sit on death row, and each one has been found guilty and sentenced to death. Behind every victim, there are families who consistently sit through numerous legal proceedings, each hearing resurfacing the horrific stories of the loss of their loved one. Yet when the appeal delays are ruled on and the time to honor the commitment has come, nothing happens. We made an oath to uphold the laws of our state. Today, we can honor that oath and remove the hurdles so that justice may be served for the victims. I do have a couple of amendments I would like to offer, and then I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Madam Clerk, on the amendment.
Next set of amendments, one-page set, offered by Representative Muscarello, set number 82.
Representative Muscarello, on your amendment.
Members, the amendment does two things. One, in committee, Representative Knox made a good motion to say that anybody that's a part of the process shall be offered counseling. What we didn't do was limit who could be counseled, and it just sets forth the parties that can be counseled. We didn't want everybody in the, to say, oh, I need counseling, because I heard about this amendment. And then secondly, there was a loophole with regards to the Prescription Monitoring Program Act. This says that the prescriptions cannot be made public, which is the reason for the bill. It's to keep secret the prescriptions and things of that nature. So I'd ask that you adopt the amendment.
Representative Newell for a question on the amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and Representative Muscarello. So it's just the actual prescription, not the pharmaceutical companies, am I understanding?
But so when we were reviewing the bill, we realized that there was a Prescription Monitoring Program Act that would make it public, which would kind of defeat the purpose of the bill. This says that they cannot make it public. It orders them to say that they cannot make it public.
So it'll still be the companies as well as the ingredients, I guess, of the injection that will be kept under
Kept
wraps.
confidential, that's
Okay,
correct.
I just needed that clarification. Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Are there any objections to the adoption of the amendment? Without objection, the amendment is adopted.
I'll take any questions.
Rep. Muscarello, we have a few other amendments. Do you want to speak on the bill, or do you want to take up those amendments now? Next amendment, Madam Clerk.
Next set of amendments, one-page set, offered by Representative Jordan, set number 128.
Representative Jordan on your amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and members. Basically, what this amendment does is it just says that the bill will be held non-severable, so that if any portion of the bill is held invalid, the whole bill will be held invalid. And so that's what it does. If we're okay and we think that what we're doing is constitutional, if we think that it's legal, if we think that it's correct, then we should have no problem with this. Just make sure we'll test your confidence. So that's all it does.
Representative Fontenot for a question on the amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Representative Jordan, just make sure I understand. So if the court, your amendment would say if the court would rule that electrocution would be held unconstitutional, it would subsequently throw out nitrogen asphyxiation as well?
That's correct.
Okay, thank you. That's all the questions I have.
Representative Jordan has offered up an amendment. Are there any objections to the adoption of the amendment?
I'm going to object to the amendment. At the end of the day, this bill will be challenged, as we all know. I mean, it's a very serious issue, so I object to the amendment.
Reverend Jordan, would you like to close on your amendment?
Just quickly, look, if we think that methods like suffocation and electrocution are legal and we have no problem with passing that, and we're talking about being transparent, I don't think anybody should have a problem with this. I think it's unconstitutional, but I know I'm assuming that my good friend and colleague, Representative Muscarello, does, or he wouldn't have put it within the bill. So if it's in the bill and it's not performative, and we're really trying to do this, then let's see where it goes.
Representative Jordan has offered up an amendment which Representative Muscarello has objected to. All those in favor of the amendment vote yea. All those opposed vote nay. The clerk will open the machine. Guyman, no. Amade, no. Landry, yea. Members, are you through voting? Jordan, yea. Clerk will close the machine. We have 30 yeas and 72 nays, and the amendment fails. Next amendment.
Next set of amendments offered by Representative Morcell, set number 108.
Representative Morcell on your amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and members. My amendment causes for notice of 14 days before a scheduled execution of the Department of Public Safety and Corrections shall furnish legal counsel for the offender with the results of independent testing of the substance or method by which the execution is to be carried out. And the reason for my amendment is simple. There has been instances where the prescription is expired or the wrong drug that's supposed to be carried out in the past at DOC. So I believe that we should at least give them notice of what that drug is 14 days prior and give them legal counsel on that particular issue.
Representative Morcell has offered up an amendment. Are there any objections to the adoption of the amendment?
I'm going to object to the adoption of the amendment. Under the statute, members, there's protocol set in place. They are already represented by counsel. I don't know why they would need an additional counsel, so I'm going to object to the amendment.
Representative Morcell, to close on your amendment.
It's not just counsel. What I'm asking for is that the drug that's being used, that the offender has the right to have the results of the test of that drug. Because in the past, we have given drugs, they attempted to do drugs that were either expired or the wrong drug. We certainly don't want people, if we're trying to carry out an execution, to have the wrong drug to carry out that execution, and that's what this amendment does.
Representative Morcell has offered up an amendment which Representative Muscarello has objected to. All those in favor of the amendment vote yea. All those opposed vote nay. The clerk will open the machine. Representative Landry, yea. Representative Phelps, yea. Furman, nay. Members, are you through voting? The clerk will close the machine. We have 31 yeas and 73 yeas, and the amendment fails. Next amendment, please.
Next set of amendments, one-page set, offered by Representative Green, set number 131.
Representative Green on your amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. What this amendment does is, upon written request by the condemned individual and his attorney, it requires the department to disclose any identifying information as far as the business, the organization, and any other entity directly or indirectly involved in the execution of a death sentence in the state. I understand the need for shielding the public, the general public, from disclosure as to the pharmaceutical companies or the actual drugs that are being used, but at bare minimum, the condemned individual and his or her attorney should be able to have access to that information. And once that information is given to the individual, that information will be kept under seal unless the court decides to lift the seal. That's what the amendment does.
Representative Green has offered up an amendment. Do we have any objections to the adoption of the amendment?
I object to the amendment. The law is clear. I mean, we've narrowly tailored this bill to address every concern, and so I'm going to object to the amendment.
Representative Green has waived on his closing. Representative Green has offered up an amendment which Representative Muscarello has objected to. All those in favor of the amendment vote yea. All those opposed vote no. The clerk will open the machine. Representative Landry, yea. Amade, no. Bayham, no. Guyman, no. McFarland, no. The clerk will close the machine. We have 33 yeas, 71 nays, and the amendment fails. There are no other amendments at this time. Representative Muscarello back on the bill.
Hello. I'll take any questions.
Representative Green on a question.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Chairman, you mentioned in your opening that 57 people have been found guilty and sentenced to death. Is that correct?
57 men and 1 woman.
Since the death penalty was reinstituted in Louisiana in 1977, has any individual condemned to death row had their sentence reversed or been exonerated off of death row?
Yes, and I will tell you that that's my position, that that's why the system works. People that have been exonerated, that shows that the layers and protections that we have in effect are working. So, yeah, yes.
When was the last time a person, or are you aware of the last time a person who was on death row was recently had their sentence vacated?
I don't know the time period, but I think I've read something recently.
Are you aware of Darrell Robinson?
I think he may have testified in criminal justice.
Are you aware that Darrell Robinson just recently, as of January 26th this year, the Supreme Court vacated his sentence and remanded it for a new trial? Are you aware of that?
Yes. But again, it shows that the system's working.
Are you aware that since 1977 to 2019, there have been 242 death sentences, 28 executions, and 128 sentences that have been reversed, and 10 exonerations since then?
I have no reason to argue with your statistics.
Are you aware that in an entire country, Louisiana leads the nation per capita in a number of exonerations per executions?
I agree with you. I have no reason to not believe you.
So is it fair to say, because we've had a likelihood to get this wrong, should we not take a pause and make sure that we let the entire process play out to make sure that that people who are condemned to death row have an opportunity to maybe prove their case and get exonerated, including after a jury has found them guilty?
So your argument is the issue of, do we abolish the death penalty? This bill doesn't do that. This bill is about the process of the death penalty. And I know that you have brought a bill to abolish it and it has failed. So I think the debate is welcome, but it's not relevant to this bill.
Well, respectfully, I would disagree, because is it your position that if your bill were to pass to become law, would we resume executions in this state?
Exactly, yeah.
Would that have a retroactive or prospective effect?
I mean, it would be retroactive.
Are you aware that there are currently 2 individuals right now on death row who've exhausted all legal remedies? So if your bill were to pass, those individuals would be put to death either by lethal injection, nitrogen hypoxia, or electric chair?
So your question is that they went through all the process, they went through all the appellate process, the victims are now waiting for their day of justice, and so yes, I would be supporting that position that they need to have their day.
But based on the facts I just gave you about our prior exonerations, what happens if we execute a person, we later find out that that person should not have been executed because of maybe prosecutorial misconduct?
I don't think that is the case. I think that the layers that are in effect, I mean, understand this. People that are on death row have some of the best legal representation out there. I mean, we just had a statistic that we spent 25% of our public defender funds just on capital defense fund. So they're getting good representation. Secondly, it's time to honor the victims, and so that's what this bill does.
So talk to me about the expansion of methods of execution. So we're adding nitrogen hypoxia, which is basically suffocation, and electric chair. Is that right?
That's correct.
So I did a little bit of research, and I learned that prior to September of 1991, the exclusive method for execution was the electric chair. And then after the legislative will was that any executions after September of 91, it would be basically by lethal injection. Do you know why we switched from the electric chair to lethal injection?
I don't know the reason, but I know that in Tennessee in 2020, they used the electric chair. So the reason why we used the alternate methods was these all have been found legal under the Supreme Court, and therefore we felt like it was a viable option, and we wanted to use every option available. Now, ultimately, the Secretary of Department of Corrections will have the ultimate decision on what method we use.
So you mentioned earlier that your bill is likely to be challenged on constitutionality.
Well, you're a lawyer. They're going to challenge everything, Representative Green. I mean, do you really believe that they're not going to challenge this?
Did you know? I think so, because, it's my opinion that the electric chair would violate the 8th Amendment under a cruel and unusual punishment, and probably...
Well, it'll be challenged because you have your opinion and everybody has their opinion, and that's why we have court systems. And you and I know that very well.
Are you aware, is the use of nitrogen hypoxia widespread in the United States?
No, it's not.
How many states utilize that method of execution?
I have that fact. Hold on one second. I want to say it's 6. I think it's 6.
Okay. What about electrocution?
What is that? Seven states.
Okay. And my last question is this. You mentioned that, a purpose of you bringing this bill is to provide justice to the victims' families. Do you have any belief that this would actually deter crime or deter heinous acts of violence?
That's not the debate, in my opinion. It's the law of the land. We said we would condemn them to death. We haven't honored that commitment. That's the debate.
But you don't think that this is going to deter bad actors?
That's been the question all session. Does it deter, does it not?
Well, that's the basis of this entire special session, is
I
we
think-
want to take certain acts that would, have an effect on violent crimes or crime generally in this state. Is that not why we're here?
Right. I
So-
agree.
So is it safe to say that you don't think that your bill will actually deter crime? It's just
It
more
would
so...
deter me.
Okay.
It deters me.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Representative Wilford Carter for a question.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Representative, did we find out how many of these 57 people, you said 2 people had completed, exhausted their appeal rights. And how long has that been, had they exhausted their appeal rights?
I don't know the time period, Judge, but I know that there are 2 that have, all appeal delays have been complete.
So why we haven't executed these people, in your opinion?
Well, that's an opinion that I mean, you're asking me to answer why Governor Edwards didn't utilize the death
So,
penalty. I
you-
think in my opinion, it was his philosophical belief that he didn't want to do it.
Are you saying that the case was appealed, the appeal was exhausted, and Governor Evans just refused to sign the death warrant, what you're saying?
I mean,
I don't-
I wasn't in the governor's office, so I don't know what he,
I don't think
Thinking.
that was what happened. But I thought, from hearing the debate in committee, I thought it was because you couldn't get anybody to sell you the drugs to do the execution.
and that's why we're bringing this bill.
All right, so is that the reason why we're bringing the bill? Because we couldn't get nobody to sell us the drugs that could do the execution?
That's right.
Okay.
And I brought
So it's
this
not-
bill-
it's not- So it's not because the then governor didn't sign the execution, it's because we couldn't get the drugs to do the execution, right?
Well, and I brought the same bill in 2019, and it didn't make it through the body.
Okay, so so you have received information from, I assume we get our drugs from a credible, in the past, a pharmaceutical company. So we have made contact with these pharmaceutical companies and determined that they're not selling the drugs for any particular reason?
I
you
have
know?
not personally contacted any drug companies.
So I'm because of this bill, I'm thinking that maybe you're doing this because, and it's not about for or against the death penalty, okay? It's not what we're debating here. So are you saying that you've been in contact with some pharmaceutical company that normally sell these drugs that say if we make this more secret, then they may sell us the drug?
The reason for the bill is that 7 other states have what's called a drug shield statute that allows them to get the drugs and not reveal the source. So that's where I got the bill from. This is not a
Okay.
novel concept that I came up with.
So would you think we should get drugs to execute a person by lethal injection from reputable or pharmaceutical companies?
Absolutely.
You recognize that we get drugs from other sources. There's other sources you can get drugs, but they may not be the quantity or properly mixed to get a successful execution. And some states have had problems with getting drugs that did not really get the job done in a reasonable fashion. They caused some problems. You heard those issues that happened in other states.
Well, I'm comforted in knowing that Secretary LeBlanc, who's been in that position for approximately 30-something years, and actually has been a part of the execution process, that he'll do it the right way.
Okay, does this bill, because the secrecy is my concern, would allow the state to get the drugs from any source that it needs to get the drugs from in order to complete the lethal injection execution? Does it limit who you can get the drugs from?
It does.
Does it say it has to be from a accredited pharmaceutical organization that's respected and recognized in this country as a pharmaceutical company, and not from some person that's in the business of providing drugs to the state to execute people that they come up with themselves? Some farmers that got a contract with the state to come up with a mixture to hopefully accomplish what the state is trying to accomplish, executing this person, that may not be a proper breakdown component of drugs to accomplish execution in a fashion that we expected to get it done in.
I have faith in Secretary LeBlanc that he's going to do it legally.
Okay, so who is so you're saying Secretary LeBlanc is the executioner for the state of Louisiana? Or do we have a designated executioner in our law?
It's whoever Secretary LeBlanc picks. I mean,
So
when
the
you're
Department of Correction?
actual injection,
The Department of Correction, some state has a designated executioner, that they have a person who's designated as the executioner. It could be
He'll
the
pick that.
chairman of the Department of Correction, it could be the warden of the prison, okay? Sort of like we sort of use, for a long time, Warden Kane at Angola. He was pretty much the designated executioner. He was pretty much president of all executions. But in Louisiana, we don't have a designated executioner, the department.
but Secretary LeBlanc picks
Okay,
the
all right.
execution.
So where the law is now, the secretary will pick someone to administer this drug and to purchase this drug from.
That's correct.
Okay. Is there any limitation on the secretary or how he go about getting this drug, or who he gets it from, or does he have to get it from an accredited pharmaceutical company?
He would have to get it from a legal source, yes.
Yeah, I know it would be a legal source. I don't think he'll go to Mexico and get some illegal drug, but I'm not suggesting that. But
Well, what do you- I don't- I
you get
don't-
drugs. All right, so you got a pharmaceutical company.
Asking me if we're going to do it legal, we will do it legal. That's the, to
Okay,
answer
no,
your
I'm
question.
asking you, is there a requirement that the pharmaceutical company that where you get the drugs from is an accredited pharmaceutical company? Like any one of the pharmaceutical companies we got operating in this country, like Pfizer or Mertha, it has to be a recognized pharmaceutical company that's licensed to do business and develop drugs in this country.
It would have to be a licensed,
So where's that law? Where's that at? I don't see it in this bill. This bill doesn't quantify where the department head, the secretary, has to get this drug from. It just says he can obtain the drug. And he obtain the drugs, and he can complete the execution. But one of the problems we had in other states.
but
And-
you're
and-
insinuating that we're going to do it illegally, and I just...
No,
I-
no, it doesn't have to be illegal. It can be from a source other than a pharmaceutical
Well, who,
company.
like the guy on the street? I mean,
No, not a guy on the street. Be somebody in the business of doing this with states that's selling states drugs to put people to death. I mean, they got companies that does this. Are you aware that not every drug obtained by a state in this country are obtained directly from the pharmaceutical company that makes the drug? There are third parties that contract with the state to procure drugs, and it may be based on some type of criteria the state require to get this drug to execute a person. But all I'm saying is it a good idea, or is it in the law, requiring that the drug be obtained from a source, from a qualified pharmaceutical company that manufactures drugs? That's all I'm asking. I don't know if, from when I read the bill, it doesn't require the secretary to get it from a pharmaceutical company that's qualified to make drugs and to mix drugs for the purpose of execution. This bill does not mandate that. That might be somewhere else that it's mandated, but I don't see it in this bill. It just say he'll get it from whatever source you want to get it from. And that doesn't mean it got to be a legal source.
this question, the answer is going to be the same, Judge, is that...
All right, so
it's
your answer is you're not aware that it has to be a pharmaceutical
I
company.
just think we disagree on the answer.
Okay. So do you have an idea what it has cost the state of Louisiana in past execution to obtain this drug for lethal injection? Got an idea what it costs?
I have no idea.
Is there any
what it costs.
limitation upon what contract the state can enter into with a provider of the drug in order to procure that drug? Could the state wants, I'm not suggesting that there ought to be a limitation on the cost of the drug, but are there any criteria to make sure we don't get in a situation where we contracting with somebody to get a drug that might not be a pharmaceutical company, that might be a middle person, and he's getting paid $1 million or $500,000 in order to provide this drug to the state? I'm just asking, is there anything in the bill that limits or some type of oversight as to how much you could pay for this drug?
No, because this bill doesn't address that at all.
Okay, but you don't think it's a good idea to have some oversight on how much money, who we contracting with to procure this drug?
I think that's a contract question.
Okay. Well,
And I have faith in the governor and his staff that they're going to be efficient and do the right thing.
well, it's really not, well, okay, the secretary would have to find the drug. Okay, So in the past, do you know how many cases of attempts to complete a lethal injection execution that went astray or did not work because the drug was not properly have the percentage of drugs, the combination of drugs. Because the combination of drugs that create this process, that result in this process, the combination of drugs and a certain percentage of the drug. So sometimes, you know how many times that we kind of messed up, we didn't get it done, or the person had to, we had to do it over again?
Well, when you're dealing with human beings, I'm sure there will be some mistakes made.
Okay.
But I have confidence in Secretary LeBlanc.
So are you aware that in 91, the way we got to this lethal injection process, that in 1990, 91, the state of Georgia and Nebraska, I think, the Supreme Court declared execution as cruel and unusual punishment. That ain't me saying that. The United States Supreme Court said that. You aware of that?
Yes.
And I don't know what's wrong with their execution process, but it was declared unconstitutional. So we in Louisiana, we sort of got away from the electrocution. Now we going back to it. So your basis for going back to it, because you indicated earlier that Tennessee did an electrocution in 2020.
20.
Okay. So we know going out the box that the execution process have been declared unconstitutional in some states, and we're passing a bill knowing that it's going to be challenged. You got an idea how long that challenge is going to take?
Judge, they're going to challenge it anyway.
I'm not arguing whether it be challenged or not. I'm arguing, do you have any idea by putting electrocution in this process? You got 3 drugs.
In my decision to put the electrocution into the bill.
So if you didn't have electrocution in the process, we know that lethal injection had been upheld, you know, and we know that the nitrogen hypoxia have been done and probably successful with Supreme Court approval. So by putting electrocution in it, you are automatically have a challenge on the electrocution question. Is there any consideration of doing the 2 lethal injection and nitrogen, and may have a better chance of getting through the muster of the legal process? Otherwise, it can take quite a while to get this process completed to the United States Supreme Court.
Well, considering we've already waited about 20-something years, I'm comfortable.
Come for the next 2 or 3 years trying to get this done. And you don't know how long it's been since we could have executed the 2 people that we haven't executed. How long a time period we talking about?
You'd have to ask Governor Edwards that.
Okay. You can ask the Department of Correction.
I don't know the answer to the question.
Well, all you do is call the Department of Correction. We can. Well, I'm asking the question. I can get it. All I can do is go to the iPhone and look up why we didn't execute these people. But the average citizen probably don't know. The Department of Correction should know. But anyway, that's not important. The important point is we don't know how much we're going to pay for it. We don't know who we're going to buy it from. And we don't know whether or not execution process is going to be lawful. We're just going to litigate that question, hold this process up until we litigate it, or why don't we just pass a bill to complete a resolution or something to require the department head to complete the execution? Why the execution have not been done? Why the legislature cannot pass a resolution requiring the department to complete its work? It's the law. So why it hadn't been done, I still don't know why it hadn't been done. I take it from you, nobody want to sell us the drug, but that's the only reason why it hadn't been done?
The reason why it hasn't been done is because now we have a governor who wants to do it. This governor wants this to proceed forward and give the victims their day of justice.
So why the governor didn't sign the death warrant, then he got in office and have it done by now?
You talking about
You
this
apparently
governor?
passing this bill. I think you are misleading the public.
I really am not
Listen,
trying to mislead.
There's nothing that I can find that a person has presented himself for the Department of Correction has presented a person for execution, and the then governor, said no, I'm not going to do it. I don't see that. I don't know where you get
Judge
this
Carter.
from.
I'm going to ask for questions.
My question is, where you get this from? Why are you saying this, and this is not true? The truth of the matter is, you said earlier that you believe it is because we cannot get the drug. Nobody want to sell us the drug. Now you're saying it's because the governor don't want to sign execution. If that be the case, Governor Landry could have done it when he got sworn in, and we should, man, be executed by now.
Judge Carter, that's a statement I'm asking for
Well,
you to
I
ask
just
a
asked
question.
I asked him to clarify where you get the information from, because that's not accurate information. So I think the accurate information, do you agree? That accurate information is we had an executed person, that the two people that should have been executed, and we don't know how long they should have been executed. The public can find out by taking proper correction. The reason why, because we couldn't get the drug. Is that not the reason?
You're asking me to answer
I'm
why.
asking you.
Okay, I'm going to answer it this way, and then I can't give you another answer. You're asking me to answer for Governor Edwin Edwards and his cabinet. I can't do that.
Okay. All right. All right. Thank you.
And you'd have to ask him why he didn't.
No, it's not. I'm asking you. You handle the bill. You saying that?
Not the governor.
Are you saying the only reason why? All right. So why we hadn't gotten it done now? If it's just the last governor didn't sign the warrant, the execution warrant. That's why it wasn't done. That is not the reason why it's done. Did you not agree? It wasn't done because we couldn't get the drug.
Okay.
I mean, you said that in committee.
Whatever
you said in committee that the reason why we hadn't do the execution because we could not get the drug, nobody want to sell the drug, and you think if we make it more secret, maybe the pharmaceutical company will sell us the drug. That's what the testimony was that I heard in committee.
Judge, I respect you, and we'll just agree to disagree.
All right, thank you.
Representative Marcel for a question.
Thank you. Representative Muscarello, have you talked to any of the pharmaceutical companies yourself as it relates to getting the drug that we need to carry out our executions? Have you, as the author of this bill, because you brought it before, right?
I did bring it in 2019.
So since you brought it before, did you, and it did not get through this process, did you think that maybe speaking to the pharmaceutical companies who were going to make the drug was a good idea? And if so, did you do that?
I did not speak to the drug manufacturers or anybody that produces the drugs. But what I did do, Representative Marcel, was I modeled our legislation after states that are currently using lethal injection and are performing in the executions. And so I felt like this would be a great model to go out, to use for our state.
So you saw some legislation that passed in another state and you decided to model their legislation because you thought that perhaps we could use it here in Louisiana to make sure our executions were carried out. Is that it?
Absolutely. I think
Okay,
most
so-
legislators, when they're drafting legislation, at least I do, I look at other states to see what's working and what's not working. I don't want to reinvent the wheel.
Okay, so when most legislators write legislation, and they do sometimes look at other states, would you agree that they may talk to the people who have to carry out those executions and find out, especially if you are introducing a method that had not been done, had been removed, like electrocution? Do you think that's a good idea to talk to the people who have to carry out the executions?
Every legislator clearly has their own style, so I can't answer for other legislators, but
I'm talking about you.
I was getting there. So I did not speak to any state agencies about electrocution or nitrogen hypoxia, but I did research, and they are legal forms of execution, and that's why they're in the bill.
Okay. And so are you aware of, in the other states that you checked, where they're storing their nitrogen, the chemicals that they're going to use for electrocution? And are you aware of where we will store this drug?
I did not go that deep into the weeds, no. I think that's an executive function, and I'll let them handle that. I've got enough on my plate.
Okay, so let me see if I got this correct. We did not speak to any of the people who are going to carry out the executions. We did not speak to the pharmaceutical companies, and we don't necessarily, I'm not gonna say you don't care, but my question is, what, have you looked at what damages could be caused to the people who are handling this drug? And they are our citizens of Louisiana, not Georgia, not Tennessee. They're citizens here in Louisiana. So if you have to handle a drug that's a dangerous drug and has to be in your possession, have we not looked, or do we care what it will do to the people who have to handle that particular drug?
This bill has nothing to do with that. That would be the function of the secretary when he sets forth the protocol to perform the lethal injection. I can't answer that question.
You can't, okay?
Why would I? This bill has nothing to do with that. This lays out the process.
It lays out the process, but it adds, would you not agree, that it adds something that we currently don't have in the law? And when we add something that's currently not in the law, a drug,
Wait, I'll answer your question.
And so we have been talking a lot about fentanyl during this session. Is that accurate? And fentanyl is a dangerous drug. Is that accurate?
To my information, yes.
Okay, so if we were going to add a drug that is a dangerous drug, wouldn't we want to know what that would do to the individuals who have to handle it, or where it is to be stored, to make sure that the wrong person don't get their hands on that drug?
I would think that the secretary will do the right thing. It's kind of like asking me if I get a road for my district, they're going to tell me the mix of the concrete and the asphalt. I don't get into the weeds on that. I just say I want a road to my district. So I don't know how
understand
I
that.
can answer that question.
I understand that, but this is a little different because we're asking people to carry out an execution, and we're putting them, if this bill passes, we're putting them in the position to say, if I'm an executioner, I have to handle this drug. And if that's going to put my life in danger, then I want to know everything about the drug that I'm handling. That is the difference between a road and this bill. So did you
I can't answer
take
your
the any
question
of,
because I don't think I can ever answer that question.
you don't think you can answer it? Okay. Let me ask you another question. Are you aware that the Louisiana Conference of Catholic Bishops and Catholic Church are against your bill?
Yes, and I'm Catholic, and I called the church and let them know that I was running the bill.
But you are aware that they are totally against your bill?
I am aware. And you know what? That's the great part about this process, is that everybody has the right to have their opinion and to make a decision based on what they believe. And I respect my church, and I'll deal with that the way I deal with it.
Yes, sir. I just want to make sure, because we're not just debating this bill for us in here. There are many people throughout the state that are listening to this bill. And I want to make sure that it's on the record that the Catholic bishops are totally against the bill. And their reasons are because they are pro-life and they don't believe in it. And so I want to make sure you knew. So that was my question about that.
Catholic, I know that, and I also called them and put them on
Okay.
notice when I filed the bill.
I thought you were Catholic. I figured you might know that. The jurors, we talk a lot about what we promised. I know I sat on criminal justice with you, and we heard a lot of testimony about what the jurors expected and what victims expected at the time of a trial. Is that your recollection?
Yeah, I think that's kind of deviating from where this bill.
Well, I'm getting ready to ask you, what about when the death sentence was handed down and the jurors found that person guilty of the heinous crime that they committed, but they only voted for the death penalty because they felt that they could live with the lethal injection? But we're now changing if this bill passes, wouldn't you agree that we're now changing that to say that we're going to do it by electrocution or by nitrogen? would you agree that that is a change from what the people initially voted for? Not only the jurors, but the victims.
Well, under Title 1430, it states that they shall be put to death. It doesn't say by lethal injection. It doesn't enumerate.
It does not. You're absolutely.
So when they're read the statute, when they're handing down their sentence, it doesn't say death by lethal injection or death by nitrogen hypoxia. It says be sentenced to death.
But at the time of.
Well, I can't assume what somebody may or may not know.
But
I know
at
the law is clear.
I'm just saying that for how long, let me ask it this way, for how long have we been doing it by lethal injection, and how long have the jurors been making decisions about putting people to death by lethal injection? And I'm gonna say this and I'll be finished. Are you aware, have you gotten any notes or any emails, as I have, from victims who, on the other side, does not want executions? Have you gotten in? And I know you said in criminal justice with me, there are victims who come to the table who do not believe in executions or lethal injection, and certainly are opposed to your bill, because I'm getting the emails since this bill has been filed. So are you aware? Because we talk about victims, but there's two types of victims. There are the ones who may be in favor of this, and there's the ones who think it's cruel and unusual punishment, and they're not in favor of it. Are you getting any of the emails or concerns from victims who do not support this bill?
I am, and I'm aware that this is part of the process. So,
Okay, I just want to make sure that the general public know that there's two sides. There are victims who support it, and there are victims who do not support it. Thank you very
Absolutely.
much. Thank you for your work, Muscarello.
Thank you.
Representative Horton for a question.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Thank you, Representative Muscarello, for your patience and your endurance and your commitment to the victims. I know that we heard a lot of testimony from victims who've been waiting 20 years for justice, 20 years. And again, as you know, we're not debating on whether Louisiana is a death penalty. That's law. But are you aware that in law, it does define what a pharmacy is?
Right.
And that our state doesn't contract with anyone that doesn't fit that definition.
And that's the reason why I brought the amendment to not reveal the pharmaceutical company.
And is it not true, the reason we could not get this drug, or to your knowledge, is it a fact that the reason we could not get the drug is because we not passed a bill and the governor signed a bill to allow the company to remain anonymous?
Right.
Okay. Thank you. Appreciate you.
Thank you, Representative Horton.
Representative Phelps for a question.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Representative Muscarello, can you tell me when was the last execution? I don't know if you mentioned that or not, but I did not hear when the last one was.
In Louisiana,
Yes, sir.
2010, pretty sure, is that right, sir? 2010, and he voluntarily asked to be executed.
Okay, and who was governor then?
I think Bobby Jindal.
Excuse me. Thank you. So when you brought the bill in 2019, obviously you were under the, were you under the impression that, what was your reason thinking that executions had not gone forth from 2010 until 19? What was the reason for your bill?
Look, I think you're asking me to get into the mind of the governor, and I just don't want to do that. I mean,
No, I asked you, what was your reason for bringing the bill?
brought the bill just like the reason I brought it today, because I think we made a commitment to the victims' families, one of them being a friend of mine named Wayne Gazzardo, whose daughter was brutally murdered. And he has sat patiently and endured a lot of pain. He wants his day in court. I mean, he wants his day of justice. And so he's ready for this to happen. And actually, one of the killer of his daughter is one of the persons that has ran through all of his appeals and is ready to be executed, or
Okay.
could be executed.
And like we all do when we are drafting a bill, I think we go to sources and get information. When you did that in 2019, what departments or what resources did you use in drafting the bill then?
I use every resource I can. I use
Okay. And that was
staff. I use my knowledge, my information that I've received.
in the
through-
Department of Corrections?
Yeah, I mean, I use every source possible.
And did they tell you why there had not been any executions since 2010?
You're kind of getting off the bill.
No.
The bill
it's-
has nothing to do with why we have not
Well, let-
performed an execution in 20, I mean, that's a question for the other administration. I know that this administration is ready and they're looking for the tools to be able to perform the executions. I'm giving them that tool today. This bill does that.
Okay, Representative Muscarello, I think it's different because we have a public that we are accountable to, the citizens of Louisiana. And we're not telling them that I don't think we should be telling them that this is about an administration when we're here with a new bill before them with two options, additional options of executions. I think we owe them the honesty of.
Well, I'm honest. Now, I don't know where that honesty word's
Well, I
coming
was
from.
going to ask you the question.
Okay.
So when you brought the bill, there was a reason that you brought the bill thinking that there were not executions in 2019. And let me get right to the point. What was the reason you were given in 2019 from the Department of Corrections, who is still a department in this state, of the reasons that they did not hand out executions
I
since
don't
that time?
recall that even having a conversation with the Department of Corrections in 2019.
But they are an intricate part of this bill and this process, right?
I know, but
They're,
I don't, to answer your question, I did not have a communication with the Department of Corrections.
and did I understand you say you did not have communication with them this time, or you did? The faith
did
that you
not.
have in LeBlanc?
I didn't feel the need.
Okay, and I guess what I'm getting to is that I'm not able to answer the question with all the information that's gone forth. Since I've been here in 2020, I know Representative Kyle Green brought a bill to diminish, and part of the conversation I think I heard then and this time was that we were not able to get the drug. So that's the basis of asking.
100% correct.
Okay, and so do we have permission now to get the drug? I didn't hear an answer when you were talking
Okay.
to.
This is the
Carter.
only answer I can give you. This will give us the ability to get the drugs. This will be a step in the right direction.
Okay, last question.
That's the
Who would
reason for the
deter-
bill.
Sir?
That's the reason for the bill.
Okay, and we're not able to tell the public now where the medication will come from,
No,
the drug,
nobody, we don't have the answer to that yet.
and that's what the citizens of Louisiana deserve to hear.
And okay,
Is that a yes?
I agree the citizens of Louisiana deserve to hear everything because that's why I'm bringing the bill.
Okay, they
They
deserve
can't
to
be-
hear where
but
we'll be able
they
to get the
can't be
injection.
But this bill prohibits them from knowing who the drug manufacturers or the persons that are part of the execution from making them public. So
Well, we know the name, but I think we were just asking where it will come from. Okay, last question. Who would determine, we said there would be by one of the following methods, who would decide which method will be used?
Secretary LeBlanc,
He's going to decide 1, 2, or 3?
yes,
And based on what?
based on his knowledge
Knowledge of,
and experience.
of,
He's been the secretary for 30 years. He's very knowledgeable about this process.
knowledgeable enough to know what method that one will be executed by?
I can't change my answer. That's the answer. It's coming from Secretary LeBlanc.
Thank you.
Rep. Willard for a question.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Thank you, Chair Muscarello, for standing there and answering our questions. Are you familiar with an instance where an execution occurred by nitrogen hypoxia recently?
Yes, I am familiar with that.
And that was in Alabama?
Yes.
Do you think the execution of Kenneth Smith was humane?
I think that the courts said it was humane, and so I'm willing to go along with the courts.
So reports said that the execution lasted over 20 minutes. He suffered. Do you think that's cruel and unusual?
I think this is off of the debate of what this bill does. You're asking me my personal opinion.
Well, I disagree because we're proposing a new execution method.
But-
So I'm asking you if it violates the U.S. Constitution.
Well, I'm not a Supreme Court judge, so I don't have the answer to that question, but I will say this. The reason why it was put in the bill, Representative Willard, is because it passed constitutional muster from the research that I've looked into. So I wanted to make this bill as clean as possible, and I didn't want to reinvent the wheel, and so that's why it's in the bill.
Okay. Do you know pharmacists are required to report to the FDA or the DEA if they prescribe medications that are used in executions?
That's why I added the amendment with the, let me give you the amendment excluding that.
So that takes it out?
Now, I don't know if it'll deal with the feds, but
Well, that's my question. My understanding is that the federal government requires that.
I can only legislate from the state level, so.
So this bill is now saying that if they prescribe that information, they have secrecy. They don't have to report that?
That's the basis of the bill, that's correct.
But if the federal government requires them to report that, don't you think that this legislation would force pharmacists to violate federal law?
I disagree with that, and the feds are currently performing, the death penalty is legal in the federal system as well.
I understand that, but it's the secrecy issue right here. So we're saying that the pharmacists don't have to provide this information, but then if they're required to report it at the federal level, aren't we basically mandating them to violate federal law?
No, I disagree with that. That's your opinion, and I think ultimately all I can do is legislate for the state of Louisiana. And I feel like this bill and 6 other states have done the same thing, and it hasn't been a problem in Texas, it has been a problem in South Carolina. So I'm comfortable with it.
Do you think this legislature is taking wise actions if we mandate state laws that violate federal laws? Yes or no would suffice there.
Well, it's not that easy, my friend. Every state has their own ability to do, states' rights. We know that. So again,
But they can't violate federal laws.
I don't think we're violating federal laws, and if we were, we would have heard about it in the other 6 states that are doing the same thing.
Did you seek guidance from the FDA or the DEA on this legislation?
No.
Will you seek guidance from them?
Well, once the legislation is passed, then the governor will have to deal with that.
So the answer there is no?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not in the executive branch, I'm the legislative branch.
Okay, and then the other issue that I just wanted to ask about, electrocutions. Are you aware that in the past, electrocutions have literally burned the flesh off of bones?
In testimony that I did hear that, yes.
Do you think that that would suffice as cruel and unusual punishment?
It was done in 2020, and like I told you, I've only pulled those forms of execution because they've been deemed legal. So your opinion and my opinion of what's cruel and unusual may be different from somebody else.
Thank you, Chair Muscarello.
Thank you, Rep.
Rep. Stagney for a question.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I supported your legislation in 2019, didn't I?
Yes.
And I'm supporting this, but I think some important issues have been raised so far as who are we getting the drugs from, how are we getting them. In the past, many thought that the FDA regulated this, and it wasn't until, 2013 when President Obama signed a bill that tried to bring compounding facilities under the FDA, but it's still not required. So where I think the bill needs a tiny bit of extra work, and maybe along the process, is either rules, a provision so that rules could be promulgated to make sure that we're getting products from licensed pharmacies or compounding facilities, or what we're getting is what we're ordering. something like that, would that be something that you would look towards in the process going forward?
I will always, if there are ever any problems with the bill and I can make it better, I would always entertain that. Now, personally, I think the bill's in a good posture. We spent a lot of time, and I'm comfortable with it, but I would never close the door on that thought.
Well, and because we're putting secrecy because of trying to carry out which is already in the law, either promulgating rules or having an independent board to make sure that we're not paying 25, 30, 100 times for the drugs or the electrocution chair. You got to have some accountability. And I would hope that along the way, we would get something that would produce that accountability. In my opinion, that's the only area of the bill that falls short. And I appreciate all your work. Hope you'll take that in consideration.
Thank you, Representative Stagner.
Representative Mandy Landry for a question.
All right, Muscarello, you said you didn't consult DOC while doing this because you didn't feel the need. Could you explain a little more why you wouldn't want to talk to the department that's going to be responsible for carrying out these orders?
You know, I find it interesting that everybody's wanting to know the homework that we do to prepare bills. That's interesting to me. You know, I guess I'll do a cheat sheet next time on every bill that I run and who I called and all I can tell you is I've done my homework. I did not call Secretary LeBlanc, but I have, looked at the protocol. I'm very familiar with it. I've done this bill twice. And it's not a knock on you, Representative Landry. I did not call DOC. I'm setting forth the protocol, and that's what I did.
I have a bill right now that touches DCFS in education and teachers, so I have consulted them to make sure I don't trip. So that's kind of my question. Were you concerned that, we often do, sorry, I'm interrupting myself. We often do and should do contact the agencies or departments or organizations that we are drafting a law involving so that we don't make a mistake. So did you just think that there wasn't going to be any sort of revisions we might need just in terms of the practicality of this law?
Look, every bill probably can use a little work. I mean, that's why we have this process. It's a very lengthy process. I've been through 2 committees. So I've received feedback, and I'm very, familiar with what I think needs to be changed or what didn't need to be changed. At this point, I'm comfortable with the bill. But to answer your question, if I call Jimmy LeBlanc and say, Jimmy, what do I need to do on this bill? I mean, I've set forth the protocol for him. The bill says, it's a drug shield statute. It's been used by other states. It sets forth the penalties if you violate the bill, and it also sets forth the forms of execution. I don't know what he can offer that would make this bill any different or any better.
Well, as those of us who sat through a lot of election law bills, we saw both of our secretaries come in to explain how things would affect their duties. So if Secretary LeBlanc were to come to you now, he may have.
No, yeah.
Would you at minimum be open to revising this at some point through the process?
I'm always open to making the bill the best it can be.
Okay. Follow up. Similar question. I think the answer is no. You did not consult the pharmacy board before filing this bill, did you?
No, I did not.
Well, I know that because I was the one who told them about the bill. I called with questions. My understanding is that this bill, I might be saying it wrong, is it completely removing all oversight of the pharmacy board from executions and the drugs used in executions?
It shields the drug manufacturers and anybody that's a part of the process. That's all it does.
Okay,
You
well,
cannot be exposed.
Okay, I'm sorry I don't have it pulled up, but it looks like it accepts, or makes an exception for a lot of our laws involving pharmacy, because there are a lot of restrictions, a lot of requirements for what a pharmacist has to report to the pharmacy board, in particular controlled substances. So I read your bill as saying that DOC or whomever would not have to follow those rules.
And that's when the amendment that I added, that the Prescription Monitoring Program Act, that's why that was added, to exclude
Okay.
them.
So that's, I'm sorry, I think I was in the back doing another amendment. So DOC or whoever involved does not have to report any of this to the Prescription Monitoring Program.
No, they do not.
And that program's in place to monitor what we're doing with controlled substances in this state. Is that right?
It's very narrowly tailored to only deal with lethal injection and other forms of execution. And look, Representative Landry, this is a tough topic. We're dealing with people's lives. I'm not saying it's going to be easy, but this is an exception that I think is important, and this is why we're doing it. So that's all I can tell you, that it's a tough bill, it's a tough set of facts, but at the end of the day, we have to make an exception, and we have to do the best we can for the victims of crime that we committed to. That's what I hang my hat on. We committed to them that we would execute their perpetrators.
I agree we need to do something for victims and for people who commit crimes. As you stated earlier, this is not a debate to repeal the death penalty, but the debate here is the way we're going to go about it in the future. And the overall, I guess, question to me is, how do you, preface it, part of the problem with, or most of the problem with getting these drugs is that the companies don't want to sell them to us. So if that is your goal here in going around the companies, why do you think this is the best way to achieve that? Why is secrecy the best way to achieve that?
It's not going around the companies. It's ensuring the companies that if they help us do provide us with the product, that they won't be exposed and they won't be subjected to harassment, to people coming and knocking on their door saying we won't do business with you anymore because you provided the drugs for an execution.
When we make the order from them, are we required to tell them what we're using the drugs for?
I don't know the answer to that.
Do you know we have, the state has contracts, or rather DOC has contracts with some of these companies that specifically prohibit the state from using these drugs for an execution?
I'm sure that's the case, and that's why we're doing this.
We should find out about those contracts.
Well, and that again, that's the secretary is going to have to jump through those hoops.
Right, and a couple people asked about federal law, and this sort of gets to why I'm wondering you didn't contact the pharmacy board, because pharmacists have certain requirements with the DEA and the FDA, and in particular, there are requirements with the compounding of drugs. So is that something you or DOC is going to have to deal with before they do this, in terms of the Angola pharmacists making sure they comply with federal law, number one? And number two, what if this does not comply with federal law?
Okay, so I'm very confident in the ability of the secretary. I've said that before. I think he will comply with every law. He's a very experienced gentleman with over 30 years of experience. That's all I can tell you, Representative Landry.
Just to be clear, no one involved with this has talked to the DEA or the FDA that you know of? No?
No.
Okay. And this is the last question, sort of goes to what we've all been asking. Is this assuming that there is no licensed pharmacist in the state who will publicly provide the drugs needed for execution?
I don't know that the governor's office or the secretary has contacted any specific pharmacists. I'm not privy to that information. What I am doing is setting forth the guidelines of when they do that, how it's going to be performed.
Is there going to be a reporting mechanism if something goes wrong here in terms of how the drugs are mixed or administered?
I'm sure the media will let us know if something went wrong.
Are you
But
sure
I have
they're going to
faith-
let us know? Are we going to be able to know? Is the public, that's a good question. If something goes wrong in an execution, is the public going to know it's because the drugs were mixed improperly or because the person did not administer them properly? Are we going to be able to know that under this bill?
I'm sure that there will be someone that files a lawsuit to ask what happened with the execution, but I'm very confident in the abilities of our secretary, and I have no worries that that's going to be a problem.
Thank you, Will. I don't know if you agree, but I don't think the public should have to file a lawsuit to get information on what its government is doing.
They're
Thanks,
probably
Nick.
going to do it anyway.
I'm sure they will. I'm sure some of them are watching right now. Thank you.
Rep. Knox for a question.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Representative, you and I have served together on Criminal Justice Committee, and I'm sure you know that I'm someone who is evolving on this whole death issue, as you can recall. My question is, why were the 2 additional methods included? The electrocution as well as the gas?
We wanted to have multiple options, and that's why they were included. And they were all, again, they were found legal, and so I felt like they were the viable options, and we wanted to have every opportunity to put those in there.
I guess if you can appreciate someone like me who is evolving, I don't mind killing someone who has killed someone. Let's be clear about that, who has taken an innocent life and who has been proven beyond a shadow of a doubt that they did that. But what this does, if you will, it complicates it for someone like me who's evolving, the method that is. Are you or will you consider making the execution public for everyone to see, to be transparent about it?
If you want to bring a bill, we'll debate that. That's not before the body today. And, you know, look, it's a highly sensitive topic. I get that, look, people are passionate about it. It's a tough bill. It's a tough set of facts. But you know, when I sit in that chair, I'm open to any option, you know, that comes before with a bill.
So would you
I would
welcome an
I would
amendment
listen to your
bill?
debate. I would make a decision and then vote accordingly.
Thank you. I appreciate you taking the question.
Rep. Muscarello, we don't have any further questions. We do have a couple of amendments. Go ahead and take up those amendments now. Madam Clerk, on the amendments.
Mr. Speaker and members, the next set of amendments is a one-page set offered by Representative Landry. They are set number 134.
Representative Landry on your amendment.
Yep, this one is public corruption. Make sure that none of us, none of our family members, no senators, none of the senators' families. Oh, I'm on the wrong one. I'm sorry. Oh yeah, sorry about that. This one relates to some of the questions I had for Rep. Muscarello, that we have to inform the companies we are buying these drugs from what we're going to do with them. As I said, right now, I've done some homework on this. Right now, the Angola Pharmacy has contracts with, I don't know how many drug manufacturers that say they cannot use certain drugs for executions. So if they started doing that without permission, the state would be breaching the contract and I don't know, possibly what other laws they would be breaching. This ensures that when they buy something from Eli Lilly or Merck or whoever, that they have to tell them what they're going to use it for. And we know that the state lies because in 2014, it became public that DOC had purchased execution drugs from Lake Charles General Hospital. And when that came to light, Judge Ulysses Thibodeau, a board member for the hospital, said, "We assumed the drug was for one of their patients, so we sent it. We did not realize what the focus was. Had we known of the real use, we never would have done it." Given how much everyone in this building seems to love business. I think you would agree that all businesses absolutely have the right to know where their product is going, and they have every right to know if it's going to be used in an execution or in anything else. That's what their contract says. That's what they have the right to know, and we have an obligation to tell them that. And if we are too embarrassed or ashamed to tell them what a product is going to be used for, maybe we shouldn't actually be using it. I think, finally, as a practical result, if we do breach one of these contracts or we use these drugs for execution and we didn't tell them, they might stop selling to us. I know that's happened. I know that's happened in other places where a company says, I'm just not going to deal with you anymore. You're not following my rules. So that is a potential unintended effect. And I'll take questions if you want to object.
There are no questions. Representative Mandy Landry has offered up an amendment. Are there any objections to the adoption of the amendment? Representative Muscarello. Hold on.
I object to the adoption of the amendment.
Representative Landry, to close on your amendment.
Yep. This does not publicize this information. It simply makes sure that in the contracts we sign with the manufacturers we buy from, that we disclose that we are going to use these drugs for execution.
Representative Mandy Landry has offered up an amendment which Representative Muscarello has objected to. All those in favor of the amendment vote yea. All those opposed vote nay. The clerk will open the machine. Rep. Mandy Landry, yea. Rep. Bagley, nay. Knox, yea. Davis, nay. Members, are you through voting? The clerk will close the machine. We have 32 yeas and 70 nays, and the amendment fails. The next amendment.
Next set of amendments offered by Representative Mandy Landry, set number 135.
Representative Landry, on your amendment.
This amendment also is something that everyone in this room should agree with about public corruption. I know it's going to happen, but we're going to try anyway. This prohibits any of us or our family members, any senator or family members, governor and family members, from profiting off selling these drugs to the state. I know that's supposed to be unethical and perhaps illegal anyway, but considering the secrecy involved here and how the public's not going to be able to just make a general public records request and it's not going to show up in the online checkbook, I think having this extra requirement that one of us is not making a bunch of money from selling execution drugs, make sure this is a more fair situation, and frankly, it's kind of disgusting if one of us would do that. So that's the amendment.
Rep. Willard.
Thank you, Rep. Landry. So to clarify, this amendment is because you have a concern that potentially a member of the legislature or the administration or someone involved in this process could start making profit through this bill
Yeah, because it already happens.
because of the secrecy provision?
Oh, even more so because no one will know it. I mean, we've seen the media just in recent years uncover how people are profiting in a way they're not supposed to, because we do have ethical rules, and it seems like nothing seems to happen. And if we don't have a requirement like this, we won't even know that it's happening.
So this amendment would essentially prohibit any of those sweetheart, under-the-table type deals?
Yep.
Thank you. I think this is a great amendment.
Thank you.
Representative Landry has offered up an amendment, which Representative Muscarello, are there any objections to the amendment?
I would like to speak. It's a duplicative bill, but I'm going to add the amendment in just because I don't want the media to think that we're trying to hide the ball. So, but I think it's an amendment that already is in place. We have ethics laws that are currently in effect, so I have no objection to the amendment.
Representative Mandy Landry has offered up an amendment. Are there any objections to the adoption of the amendment? Without objections, the amendment is adopted. Representative Jordan for the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and members. know, I know, at least, and I feel like I know, and Representative Muscarello and I have spoken on this bill privately, and we've spoken about several other things before, and I think he comes from a good place, and he has a good heart. On this one, we disagree, though. And I would love to tell you that I disagree because my primary reason is that I agree with my bishops and for religious purposes, and I believe in life and all those good things. But that is not my primary reason for opposing this bill. My primary reason for opposing this bill is the way that our justice system is carried out, or the injustice system is carried out. Now, I heard Representative Muscarello talk about several people who had been exonerated, and he said, well, that tells me that the system works. Well, let me tell you something about people where the system did not work. There was a group called the Martinville Seven, and this group was in 1949. 7 young black men were accused of raping and beating a white woman in Martinsville, Virginia. And I'm going to give you their names: Francis Grayson, Frank Hairston Jr., Howard Hairston, James Luther Hairston, Joe Henry Hampton, Booker T. Milner, and John Taylor. Those people were interrogated by the police. And you know what the police told them? They said, if you do not confess to this crime, we're going to free you to the angry mob that's waiting outside to lynch you. And what did they do? They confessed to the crime. Years later, in fact, after being executed, they were exonerated. This was in 1949. They were executed in 1951. They were exonerated in 2021. The governor of Virginia at that time, Ralph Northam, he said, they serve as recognition from the Commonwealth that these men were tried without adequate due process and received the racially biased death sentence not similarly applied to white defendants. I'll give you another one. The Groveland Four in Florida, same thing, rape accusation by black men to a white woman. 2 of them were World War II veterans. They were killed, executed by the state. 70 years later, they were pardoned by the governor. I can tell you there was a South Carolina pair exonerated 94 years after their execution. Thomas Griffin and Meeks Griffin. There was a lady in Georgia. She was pardoned 60 years after her execution. I'm going to give you this one. It almost made me chuckle if it wasn't so serious. In 1987, Nebraska Governor Bob Kerrey pardoned William Jackson, who had been hanged exactly 100 years earlier for the murder of a man who later turned up alive. Think about that. All these people were executed, later exonerated and found innocent because the system didn't work for them. Now, I'm going to give you one other one. Glenn Simmons. Now, Glenn Simmons is alive, thankfully. He's alive. But Glenn Simmons is he has the record of being the person that served the longest on death row after being exonerated. He served 48 years, 1 month, and 18 days on death row. Was exonerated last year. He was convicted in 1974 for a death that occurred in 1973. He is the 195th person exonerated after being sentenced to death. The 195th. Let me tell you why I bring him up. Because this happened in Edmond, Oklahoma. At the time of the crime in Edmond, Oklahoma, Do you know where Glenn Simmons was? He was at his home in Harvey, Louisiana. A native of Louisiana. At the time that the crime occurred, he was here with his family in Louisiana. He moved to Oklahoma 2 weeks later, only to be identified by a white person as the person who committed the crime. He had all his family testify on his behalf to say he was not even in Oklahoma. We can tell you he was here in Louisiana. All-white jury did not buy that, sentenced him to death. The problem is we're supposed to have a presumption of innocence, but for most of us, that presumption does not exist. We do not get the same due process, even though we might go through the process. So for all those people I named, and for the Glenn Simmons of the world, this is why I opposed the bill. But since it's Black History Month, let me just say a few other things about some people who didn't get due process. Someone like Emmett Till, who was falsely accused of just whistling at someone and was strung up, hanged, thrown in the river, and drowned. I'll go back a little bit later, the Colfax massacre in Colfax, Louisiana. One closer to us, Mr. Speaker, the Opelousas massacre, which happened. So I oppose this bill for the Glenn Simmons of the world, for the folks that I mentioned in Florida, for the Emmett Tills of the world, and the countless and nameless others who did not get that presumption of innocence. Thank you.
Representative Muscarello, to close on your bill.
Thank you for the healthy debate. I appreciate the process, and I ask for your favorable passage.
Representative Muscarello moves the final passage of the bill. As many of you are in favor, vote yea. Those opposed, vote nay. The clerk will open the machine. Rep right, yea. Green is a nay. Members, are you through voting? Robbie Carter, yea. Members, are you through voting? The clerk will close the machine. We have 71 yeas and 29 nays, and the bill passes. Representative Muscarello moves to adopt the title and moves to reconsider the vote with which the bill finally passes. Lay that motion on the table. Without objection, so ordered.